And our guests for the panel are Lucinda Hartley, co-founder and Chief Innovation Officer at Neighbourlytics; Guy Holland, Partner in Charge, Digital Consulting and Technology at KPMG; and Jamie Twiss, Chief Data Officer for Westpac. Welcome to the program. Jamie, if I could start with you. How do you think that businesses are adapting to and adopting the new technologies?
Well, Bernard, when a business adopts a new technology, I think there are really two overlapping phases. The first one is building the technology and the capability to use it. So in the case of, for example, big data, it's the ability to create and ingest large amounts of data, to then store it, and then transform it and use it in different ways. That's the first part. The second part is then that business has to rebuild itself around the new technology. So instead of just having a single thread of technology sitting off to the side, it actually re-engineers its products, its processes, and indeed even the capabilities of its people and its culture around that new technology to really take full advantage of it.
Lucinda, how do we measure its success? Is this something that's particularly hard in a fast-moving area like new technologies?
I think the thing that we have to keep in mind is to think about, in all of the technology that we have available, what's the purpose of it? And we can be automating a range of things, but always keeping a really clear goal in mind. And, you know, particularly in our work on smart cities, we're thinking about, well, what's the purpose of creating more efficient, smarter cities? And we really need to keep people at the centre of whether it's organisational transformation, business transformation or city transformation, thinking about how we actually have goals around creating healthier and happier lives for people in those situations.
And are we making any progress in that?
In terms of the goal setting, I think we have the aspiration to create better outcomes for people through our technology. In terms of, you know, the second part of your question about how easy it is to do, well, it's really easy to measure the kind of more concrete, tangible aspects like retail vacancies or traffic flows or air quality and things like that. When it comes to some of, you know, the culture of our organisation, the social life of our cities and places, those things are much more complicated, but emerging technologies, particularly a lot of big data sources, enable us to put quantitative information around those measurables as well.
Guy, there's a lot of buzzwords around digital transformation, but is business really ready to make that transformation?
I think the picture's mixed. As Jamie was saying, there are a couple of important parts to transforming into a digital context. One is identifying the technologies and making sure your decisions around the investment in those technologies are anchored into your business strategy. That's very important. Most organisations have got better at that. I think the challenge for many organisations now is in connecting their front, middle and back office into a seamless entity to enable digital transformation to happen at pace, perpetually, with the support of the whole organisation. And that requires different ways of working and potentially some changes to the culture within an organisation to make sure you optimise those investments in technology.
I might throw this one open to all panel members. There's incredible pressure these days in business to get it right because customers want something that's intuitive, responds to their personal needs and so forth. How does business respond to this consistent pressure to evolve to meet customer demands like that? Any thoughts?
So one of the things that we think about quite a bit is, first of all, designing everything we do around what the customer is looking for. So I think the old days of here's a way that it's convenient for us to provide this product or service, those days are at an end. It's much more what is the customer looking for. But to come to the second part of your question about the pressure to get it right the first time, that's incredibly important in financial services and indeed in everywhere else. And what we're looking at there is where do we see possible variability that we can remove. One of the best ways of doing that is taking a manual process and automating it so that the computer can do it the same way every time. And that reduces a lot of the friction and a lot of the errors that frustrate customers.
Trust, privacy and security all seem to go together in this space. How's business managing? Are we managing? Is business doing well in this space at the moment? It would seem to me that trust is a major issue for business generally. Lucinda?
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about the public spaces and public realm of cities, trust becomes a big issue really quickly. And if we're looking at the types of technology around Internet of Things and other sensing technology that's now available to help us understand cities better and ultimately make better decisions about them, but it has a lot of questions for people around around their consent in that data collection. And in that smart city space, we haven't seen a lot of resolution about that yet, but we are seeing an increasing dialogue around the importance of user consent in the way that data is collected and ultimately used.
Guy, do you have a...
Yeah, and I think just picking up on that, I think it's important to remember trust can take a long time to earn and a very short time to lose. I think most people are comfortable with data, their own personal data, being used by organisations, but it needs to be used for good, either for themselves or for the broader community. I think when organisations start to cross the freak line, that's when you start to lose trust very quickly.
There is another important social issue here, and that is that the greater the engagement with the digital world, there is the thinking that this is leading to an increase in loneliness and isolation, social isolation. What are your thoughts on this space, Lucinda?
Technology does have the ability to, what we see around is that we see that people are, using technology, they're always on their phones, and we can make the assumption that therefore that is the cause of loneliness and isolation. And while on one level there may be some truth in that, but technology also has the enormous capability of bringing us together in new and effective ways of connecting with people that we didn't know, or events and programs that bring people together in new and interesting ways. And so I'm an optimist that actually technology will help us solve loneliness and social isolation more than it will drive disparity in that area.
Guy, what do you think that how business and government can address these social questions?
Yeah, I think business and government have got a significant role to play there. If I think about government in the context of education, I have a young daughter, she's at school, and to a certain extent the use of technology and its importance is reinforced because technology is used more and more in the education environment. But again, I think it's down to government and the education authorities to ensure that a balanced picture is portrayed to children of the use of technology, its value in bringing people that might be disconnected in the community together, but also there's a limit to how far we can go with that, and the importance of personal social interaction in the development of our children is very important as well.
Jamie, diversity is also a very real issue, a very real question. How does technology and business address that particular issue?
So I think there are a couple of challenges with diversity and inclusion. One is diversity within the technology sector itself, and historically we have not done a good enough job of bringing women into technology, people from different backgrounds, people who are disadvantaged into technology, and there we need to focus much more on the pipeline of talent. I think we also should think about the power of technology to drive inclusion more broadly, as Lucinda was saying earlier, in terms of bringing people who might be less active in the public sphere, bringing them together in a common way.
Australia is very good at generating ideas, inventing ideas, but we're not very good at holding that talent. I think this is particularly relevant in this space. What's your thinking in that regard?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, although I think we have a tendency in Australia to beat ourselves up a little bit about how relatively good we are compared to some of the rest of the world. I think there is talent here. I think there's some great things that are being done in Australia. But I think the government, certainly, again, to your earlier point, has a role to play in providing the environment, the ecosystem to nurture that talent, to provide funding and to make sure that we do retain that talent within Australia.
I think when you're looking at a global market, and Neighbourlytics is a fairly early stage startup, and we're asking ourselves these questions as a global business, how do we operate out of Australia? And certainly there are lots of advantages to the Australian economy, but if you are competing in that global market, finding the right talent can be challenging. And I think the real question is, how do we make Australia the best possible place to live? How do we attract the best talent who wants to live here? And we're well on our way to doing that.
Jamie.
So I think I wouldn't underestimate the power of technology also to make geographic distance less relevant than it's been in the past. And one of the things I'm very optimistic about with Australia's future is the ability for global world-class talent to be here and yet still work at a global level and a global scale.
Thanks very much. And we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much to our panel, Guy Holland, Lucinda Hartley and Jamie Twiss.